Okay guys, we got some breaking news here, and it's something I mentioned in my video yesterday. The Spectator magazine challenged the order on what could be said about the Salmond scandal involving the SNP, of course, Nicola Sturgeon and her husband being chief among them. This went all the way to the High Court, as I said yesterday, and the Spectator has won today, which is good news. The juice could start flowing very soon over this. But before we get into all that, remember to follow me on my Odyssey and BitChute channels, along with my other social media that are linked down below. A fair few of you have joined me already, so anyone else that wants to do it, the link will be in the description, as I said. But back to the Spectator's challenge, which has been successful, with the judge in question, Lady Dorian, varying the order which will allow Salmond's evidence to be published, among others. It also means more reading walls of text for me, which is not fun, but it is good to watch the SNP eat itself alive through their own stupidity, so I consider it a worthy sacrifice at the end of the day. Now, as this is breaking news coming out a little while ago, there is not much information on it, and at the time of recording, the Spectator themselves have said nothing that I can find. The Press and Journal, along with a few others, have covered it, so let's take a look at what they have to say. It does appear that the judge actually said the Crown Office interpreting the order in the way that they did is absurd, which if you ask me sounds like a bit more arse covering. Remember, the Crown Office have been implicated in the stitch-up with the SNP itself. This whole situation, I'm sure you would agree, stinks to high heaven. Hopefully, we will get to the bottom of it soon. Let's be honest, it's costing the taxpayer a fortune. Now, the article on this headlines, Alex Salmond could appear before inquiry after legal ruling. A legal ruling could pave the way for Alex Salmond to give evidence to the Holyrood Committee investigating the way the Scottish Government handled allegations against him. The former First Minister's scheduled appearance on Tuesday was cancelled amid a dispute over his evidence and a decision not to publish his full submission. A legal action by the Spectator could now force a U-turn on the publication. Labour's Jackie Bailey said the decision presents the committee with the opportunity to publish the evidence and question Mr Salmond. It is clear from today's decision that the publication of the evidence is in the public interest and that it may be used by the committee. It is the duty of the committee to get to the bottom of this fiasco and understand why the Scottish Government's procedures were so flawed and why the women involved were badly let down. I have called for an emergency meeting of the committee tomorrow, and I hope that colleagues will allow publication of the evidence and invite Mr Salmond to attend in person. Failure to seize on this opportunity would be most unfortunate for the credibility of the committee and its work. I think you'll find them failing to release the information in the first place kinda ruins their credibility, but let's be honest, they're fake independent supporting tosspots. What credibility did they really have? It goes on, Conservative committee member Murdo Fraser said, "We have been saying from the outset that our committee will not be able to do its job properly unless we are able to question Alex Salmond in person. While we await the full details of the revised orders and what implications it will have, I am satisfied that we now have grounds to compel Salmond to attend." Which obviously, if you believe Alex Salmond, is apparently what he wants to do. He just wants to make sure he's not going to be done for perjury or contempt of court if he speaks about something that might be able to identify one of the accusers against him. This is something that Craig Murray has also been dealing with, as I covered when I went through his evidence a few weeks ago. He goes on, "I would expect SNP members to agree that this must happen, as suggested yesterday by Nicola Sturgeon herself. Sturgeon has already lied to Parliament by saying she and her party would ensure full cooperation with the inquiry. The reality has been a cynical and determined campaign to thwart us at every turn. People may be confused and frustrated at this despicable SNP chicanery. It is therefore vital for the committee to show its teeth. A failure to do the right thing would undermine the reputation of our Parliament," which I have to say, to be honest with you, the SNP themselves have already undermined enough. Now here we have somewhat of a better explanation about what was actually going on in the court case itself. This is coming from Wings Over Scotland, what appears to be an independent website with its own YouTube and Twitter accounts. I will link the page down below so you can check them out if you want to. It says, High Court Update. The Spectator's application to the High Court for a variation of the anonymity order in HM Advocate versus Alex Salmond has just finished. It seems to have been agreed by all parties that Lady Dorian will now amend her order to include the words, "as such, complainers in these proceedings," after the part about not identifying any of the complainers. This is potentially very significant because it clarifies an interpretation that Lady Dorian described in court as absurd, but which, nonetheless, appeared to be the interpretation being applied by the Crown Office in respect of the order. Which is obviously why I said about them trying to cover their own arsehole earlier on. It certainly appears that way, especially if any of this is true. Given that the judge themselves described their interpretation as absurd, I'm willing to bet that it is. It goes on, in short, and remember Wings Over Scotland is not a lawyer, and neither am I. The order, as it previously stood, appeared to prohibit a person who was a complainer in the case from being identified, even in ways totally unrelated to them being a complainer. In other words, you simply couldn't safely mention this person's name in any context without putting yourself at risk of prosecution. So you couldn't, for example, say Nicola Sturgeon's bank manager is Jane Doe, if Jane Doe was one of the complainers, even though that sentence doesn't say anything at all about her being a complainer. With the amended version of the order, which we assume takes effect more or less immediately, although we don't know if it's also retrospective, you would now be able to say that safely unless it has been published somewhere that one of the complainers was Nicola Sturgeon's bank manager, because those two pieces of information together would form a jigsaw identifying Jane Doe as a complainer. He goes on, by our reading, and please continue to remember at all times that Wings Over Scotland is not a lawyer, and obviously neither am I. The changes remove any possible issues with Alex Salmond's submission to the committee, and clears the way for the committee to publish it and have him appear as a witness, which is something we have also just seen reported by other media outlets, so is likely to be true. And he goes on there to mention two committee members who we've already read what they had to say. So as it stands, we could well see the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon's House of Cards come crashing down very soon. I am sure this will make Alex Salmond go up and give evidence now, as that's what he's been saying. Personally, I hope he actually does a press conference like he said he was and then goes and speaks in the committee. That, in my opinion, will be the best way to hang her out to dry, which is what she really needs. If indeed any of the shit is true that we've been going through over the past couple of weeks, then she definitely needs to be hung out to dry by Parliament and everyone else. In fact, questions should be asked if criminal charges should be brought against her and her co-conspirators. Her husband has already been accused of perjury, so who knows what will happen to him. My betting is nothing, but hopefully that is not true.